Yara began inputting the familiar pulse sequence, 3 short, 1 long, the same pattern they'd exchanged with the sphere days before. She transmitted it through every available band. Moments later, the incoming object's signal responded in kind, then altered it slightly, expanding the rhythm with 2 new intervals. Senna whispered, "It's correcting us." "Or evolving the conversation," Arian said. "Continue." They mirrored the sequence again. The return transmission adjusted once more, faster now, building upon itself until the signal became a cascade of structured harmonics. The resonance filled the station until every monitor vibrated. Then, suddenly, it stopped. The alien voice returned one final time. Threshold accepted. Descent authorized. Mayek's knuckles whitened on the railing. Descent, Senna looked at her readings. It's accelerating directly toward the planet. Arian stared at the data feed as realization dawned. It's not coming for us, it's joining the structure. The object entered the atmosphere hours later, a streak of white against the black expanse. It didn't burn or fragment. Instead, it slowed, guided by invisible vectors, until it aligned perfectly with the center of the planetary lattice. Impact registered as a tremor that made the station's hull shudder. Then light. Blinding, ordered light. The planet's entire surface ignited in a synchronized pattern that pulsed once, twice, then steadied into a glowing network visible even to the naked eye. Yara whispered, "It's awake." Joran's voice was hollow, and it remembers how to breathe. The energy levels stabilized within hours. The structure ceased expansion, maintaining equilibrium. Gravity normalized. But the data output from the planet continued to grow exponentially, flooding every sensor. Senna stared at her console. The signal's no longer outbound, it's mapping everywhere. All directions. Mapping what? Mayek asked. Space itself, she said. Distances, alignments, trajectories. It's recalibrating the system's position relative to something else. Yara looked up sharply. You mean it's communicating with something beyond? Arian nodded slowly. It's not a machine for war, it's a beacon. Mayek exhaled. That's supposed to make me feel better? No, Arian said, eyes fixed on the glowing world below. It's supposed to make you understand that we're not alone, and we never were. The beacon had stabilized, but the calm that followed felt like the pause before a tidal wave. Every instrument aboard Bastion 9 registered new anomalies. The gravitational field across the system trembled at regular intervals, as though the very shape of space was being rewritten in pulses too vast to comprehend. Arian stood in the observation gallery with Yara and Senna. Below them, the planet's surface was a network of pale lines, glowing softly through the clouds like veins under translucent skin. From this height it looked alive, breathing through geometry. Joran's voice came over the intercom. Field readings are steady now, but there's a new modulation embedded in the resonance. Not random, structured. Yara frowned. Structured how? Triangular interference patterns, 3 overlapping waveforms cycling in counter-rotation. Arian said quietly, triangulation. It's establishing position relative to 2 other points. Senna's breath caught. There are others, possibly, he said, or it's calling them into alignment. Mayek joined them, his boots heavy on the deck. You realize what that means? We've turned on an interstellar beacon without knowing who built it or why. Yara didn't look away from the planet. We didn't turn it on. We just stopped it from staying buried. Mayek gave a humorless laugh, comforting distinction. In the control hub, data scrolled faster than any of them could process. The entire electromagnetic spectrum was alive with interference. Parts of the transmission carried recognizable mathematical constants, but others drifted into chaos, ratios that shifted between dimensions, equations that shouldn't balance but somehow did. Joran rubbed his eyes. I can't even tell which of these numbers are real anymore. Senna leaned over his shoulder. They're real, just not confined to our kind of reality. He gave her a strained smile. That's exactly what worries me. By the 30th hour after the beacon's ignition, the first visual anomaly appeared. Pull up Sector 4, Yara said. Upper atmosphere, east quadrant. The image resolved into a shimmer of distortion, not light, not heat, but curvature itself bending in faint arcs. Mek stepped closer. "That's not weather." "No," Yara replied. "That's space-time compression. Something's pushing through." Arian's voice was calm, too calm. "Estimate arrival vector. Directly above the rift," she said. "Then whatever answered is coming through the door we just unlocked," he said. Senna's readings confirmed the impossible. The distortion wasn't inbound from deep space. It was forming locally, folding out of the gravitational field the beacon generated. "It's not an object," she said. "It's a corridor, a dimensional bridge." Joran's hands shook slightly over the controls. "A bridge to what?" "Another point in spacetime," Arian said. "Maybe another beacon, maybe its origin. Or maybe something worse," Mek muttered. They all watched as the distortion solidified into a sphere of refracted light high above the planet's surface. It pulsed once, twice, then stabilized, a perfect lens of nothingness, reflecting the stars behind it. Yara whispered, "It's beautiful." "Everything catastrophic starts that way," Mek said. The sphere expanded gradually, maintaining absolute symmetry. Every pulse from the planet matched one from the structure in orbit. The resonance locked them together, system and beacon, creator and signal. Arian said, "We are linked now. Whatever happens next, we are part of it." Senna turned toward him. "Then we have to decide what kind of part, passive observers or participants." "We came here to learn," he said, "but learning might mean becoming the experiment." Mayek crossed his arms. "Or the casualty." No one answered. 4 hours later, the station's power flickered for the first time. Yara ran diagnostics. "No external interference. It's draining our systems through field resonance, like it's using us to stabilize itself." Arian didn't hesitate. "Disconnect the external collectors. Isolate life support from main power." She obeyed, and the station dimmed to half illumination. The hum of machinery faded to an uneasy whisper. Senna said quietly, "If we cut all power, we might lose orbit." "Better that than being absorbed into whatever it's building," Mek muttered, but it was already too late for clean separation. The station vibrated with deep rhythmic pulses, not dangerous yet, but growing stronger. Yara looked at Arian. "It's synchronizing us again." "Then maybe we need to talk to it before it decides what we are," he said. They returned to the communications deck. The beacon still transmitted on every frequency, but Arian found the bass rhythm beneath the noise, the same pattern from the sphere's early lessons. He matched it, broadcasting from the station's remaining array. The response came instantly, a surge of light from the planetary surface, forming spirals visible even from orbit. Senna whispered, "It recognizes us." Arian spoke into the mic. "We are human, we seek understanding." The response was visual rather than audible. Lines of energy raced across the planet, converging into symbols that burned in slow, deliberate patterns, symbols identical to the ones from the sphere's data lessons. Yara captured the feed, translating it into numeric matrices. "It's giving us information again." "Not language," Arian said. "Instruction." "Instruction for what?" "To interface," he said. The translation took hours. The message described a process, activation of a threshold sequence using gravitational synchronization. The mathematics were beyond them, but the structure of it was unmistakable. The beacon was meant to link multiple worlds together, creating a network of stable spacetime corridors. Senna's voice was barely audible. "It's not a weapon, it's a bridge between civilizations." Mayek said, "Civilizations that might be dead for a reason." Arian looked at the data scrolling past, "Or civilizations waiting for others to arrive." He turned to Yara. "If we can control part of this signal, we might be able to limit what it connects to, contain it." She hesitated. "You want to edit an alien gravitational beacon?" "We have no choice," he said. "If it opens completely, we could be inviting something here we can't understand." They worked through the artificial night. Yara linked the comm array to the station's core sensors, attempting to overlay a dampening signal against the beacon's output. Every calculation risked destabilizing the orbit, but they had no better options. Joran coordinated the equations. If we match the inverse phase of the beacon's pulse, we can create a localized interference field. It won't shut it down, but it might muffle it. Do it, Arian said. They transmitted the counterpulse. For a moment, the entire system seemed to hold its breath. Then the planet's glow dimmed slightly. It's working, Yara said. Senna smiled faintly. We actually changed it. But before relief could take root, a deep vibration shook the station. The distortion above the planet flared, expanding violently before collapsing into a pinpoint. Joran shouted, "Gravitational recall, the corridors destabilizing." The beacon flared brighter than ever, flooding the planet in blinding light. "Cut the transmission," Arian ordered. Yara killed the signal. The light subsided slowly, unevenly, until the surface dimmed again. Mech exhaled. "Tell me we didn't just destroy a planet." "No," Yara said, staring at her instruments, "but we stopped the link. The corridor's gone." Senna sat back, trembling. "Then we just disconnected a civilization from the universe." Arian looked down at the now dark lines on the world below. "Maybe. Or maybe we gave it peace again." Hours later, the sensors showed no remaining anomalies. The gravitational field normalized. The beacon remained intact but dormant once more. The crew gathered in the silent control room. The air felt thin, used. Joran said softly, "If there were others out there, they know this world's awake, and that someone interfered." Mayek nodded. "So we've either saved ourselves or painted a target on our backs." Arian's gaze remained fixed on the planet. "Maybe both, but either way, we've proven one thing." Senna asked quietly, "What's that?" "That humanity doesn't just find ancient gods and kneel," he said. "We talk back." The world below Bastion 9 looked calm again, the lattice dimmed to a soft haze beneath its clouds. No tremors, no violent light, no further anomalies. To an untrained eye, it might have looked like the planet had gone back to sleep. Inside the station, it felt like standing beside something that was only pretending to rest. The hum of the engines returned to a steady rhythm. Yara and Mech walked the maintenance ring, running diagnostics by hand, old-fashioned wrenches and all. The routines helped something tangible after days of equations and impossible math. "You think it's really over?" Mech asked. Yara tightened a panel screw. "Over isn't a word I'd use. Stable, maybe, for now." He looked out the narrow viewport. "You ever get the feeling that when we shut that thing down, it didn't stop, just shifted?" She wiped her gloves. "Every minute." In the command hub, Arian watched recorded telemetry. The interference they'd caused had interrupted the corridor sequence at precisely the moment it would have completed triangulation. For all practical purposes, they had stopped the beacon from connecting. He wasn't sure whether to feel proud or guilty. Senna entered quietly, a data slate in her hand. "There's something you need to see." He glanced up. Another anomaly, not local. She placed the slate on the console. "These are deep-array observations from the outer sensors. We're picking up gravitational echoes, weak but patterned. 2 other points in space emitted identical pulses 27 minutes after we stopped the beacon." Arian frowned. "Coordinates?" She keyed them in. 2 distant stars appeared on the holomap, one far beyond their reach, the other uncharted. "They answered," Senna said softly. Joran joined them a moment later. "The patterns identical to the planet S, down to the fractional timing." Mayek's voice came over the comm, so the neighbors heard the noise. "Worse," Yara said, appearing behind him. "They responded." Arian looked from one to the other. "Then we didn't stop the connection, we redirected it." Senna's gaze was steady. "You think the network adjusted?" "I think whatever built it designed it to survive interruption." For the first time since the signal's activation, Bastion 9 was no longer alone. Instruments now detected faint gravitational harmonics washing through the system every few hours, as though the void itself had learned to breathe in rhythm. Joran stared at the readouts. "The pulses are passing through us. They're not aimed here, they're using this system as part of the chain." Mayek folded his arms. "We're a relay now," Yara said, "a relay that didn't ask to exist." Arian's tone was grim. "And can't afford to break again." They convened in the galley, cramped, metallic, smelling faintly of recycled air and coffee that had boiled too long. It was where decisions felt human, not theoretical. "We can't leave the system," Senna said, "not without knowing what this network does. If it's building corridors again, the next one might open right through our orbit." Mayak shook his head. "So what, we babysit a cosmic switchboard for the rest of our lives?" Joran answered quietly, "until someone back home sends relief, if they ever can." Yara's voice carried fatigue but not defeat. "We can stabilize our orbit and keep observation running indefinitely, but if those distant points start increasing power, we'll see feedback." Arian nodded slowly. "Then we prepare for that. No interference, no transmissions, no further experiments. We observe." Senna looked at him, "And if observing isn't enough, then," he said, "we adapt." The days that followed blurred into a strange peace. The planet stayed quiet. The beacon's structure gleamed faintly under the suns as though sleeping beneath glass. Yet the background resonance never vanished. It pulsed faintly through every wall of the station, steady, inevitable, like a slow heartbeat. Yara measured it once every shift. "Amplitude's constant," she told him, "but the frequency's drifting, slightly higher every day." "Direction?" Arian asked. "Up, toward resonance with our orbital band." Mayak swore under his breath. "It's tuning itself to us again." Senna rubbed her eyes. "Maybe it never stopped. Maybe it's adjusting until we match perfectly." Arian said, "Or until it decides we are part of the network." No one answered. 2 weeks later, something new happened. Joran was in the lab, sorting through sensor logs, when one of the displays flickered. Lines of alien script, identical to the language the sphere had once shown, spilled across the screen. "Yara," he called. "I think the system's compromised." She arrived seconds later, eyes scanning the console. The symbols rearranged themselves in perfect grids, forming equations she didn't recognize. "It's writing again," she said, "but it's using our computers." Arian arrived, calm but intent. "Isolate the system." "I already tried," Yara said. "No external connection. It's not invading, it's mirroring." He frowned. "Mirroring what?" "Us," she said. The station's computers began producing patterns that matched the crew's last transmissions and recorded communications, reflected back, rewritten in the same alien syntax. It was as if the beacon were replaying every human signal it had ever heard, translating them into its own form. Senna stared at the repeating lines. "It's learning language again." Arian nodded slowly. "Then it's not finished with us." Mayak muttered, "What if it's not learning? What if it's copying?" "Same process," Arian said. "The difference depends on intent." By the end of the shift, the symbols stopped changing. The final string of equations stabilized into a repeating cycle. Yara ran it through the translation algorithm. "It's repeating one phrase," she said quietly. Arian turned. "What phrase?" She looked at him. "The bridge endures." The words hung in the air. Senna whispered, "Then the connection's still open somewhere." Arian nodded. "We closed one door, there are others." Outside, the stars looked unchanged. Yet Bastion 9's instruments detected subtle motion in the background radiation, the same faint distortions they'd seen before the first sphere appeared. Meg stared at the readings. "There's something moving out there again." Joran frowned. "How far?" "Too far to see, too close to ignore." Arian straightened. "Keep the sensors trained. If something comes through, I want warning before it breathes." He turned back to the viewport, the planet gleaming below. "We started this by answering. Maybe the next step is waiting for the reply." The alert came on the fourth rotation after the phrase first appeared. A low, resonant tone rolled through Bastion 9's structure, followed by a cascade of sensor pings that lit every console red. Yara's voice cut through the hum. "Gravitational disturbance inbound. Velocity near light speed. Deceleration impossible under normal physics." Arian moved beside her. "Trajectory aligned with the previous beacon vector." Joran scanned the readings. "It's not matter, it's a field compression wave, something folded inside a gravity pulse." Mayak swore, "We're getting mail from the void." Senna's hands trembled on the console. "How long until arrival?" Yara's calculations flashed on the display. 7 minutes. "Full shields," Arian ordered. Lock down the outer decks. Everyone to central control. The station's bulkheads groaned as containment systems powered up. Transparent panels sealed the observation deck, and the hum of magnetic stabilizers filled the air. The crew gathered in silence, watching the central holomap as the pulse approached, a distortion rather than a visible object, dragging spacetime behind it like a comet's tail. Joran whispered, "It's matching our orbital velocity. It's not crashing, it's parking." Senna's eyes widened. "Then it's guided." Yara looked at Arian. "We could try sending a signal, identify ourselves before it decides what we are," Mech interrupted. "Maybe silence is safer." Arian shook his head. "We've already spoken. There's no pretending we're invisible." The wave reached the planet's upper atmosphere. Instead of dispersing, it compacted into a narrow column of light, pale, translucent, steady. It struck the surface where the old beacon structure lay dormant. The lattice lines on the planet ignited again, spreading outward in perfect synchronization. Yara's voice was hushed. "The bridge endures." Arian nodded slowly, "And it's reopening." The crew watched as the light deepened, thickening into a pillar that connected ground to orbit. From its upper tip, filaments extended, thin as threads, luminous as plasma, reaching toward Bastion 9. Joran stared. "It's anchoring to us." Mayek muttered, "I told you we'd become part of it." The threads touched the station's lower hull. Sensors flared but didn't fail. Instead of damage, they reported rising energy potential across every deck. Yara said, "It's charging our systems." Senna checked the readings. "Power outputs increasing beyond capacity limits. If we don't vent it," Arian raised a hand. "Wait, it's stabilizing. It's balancing itself through us." He could feel it, a subtle vibration through the deck, like a pulse echoing underfoot. "It's using us as a conduit," Yara said, "feeding the network through our systems." "Then we pull the plug," Mech snapped. "No," Senna said quickly. "If we cut the flow mid-transfer, the feedback could vaporize the station. So we just sit here and let it use us." Arian's voice was quiet. "Until we know what it's building, yes." The light around the planet shifted color, turning from white to deep cobalt. The effect was hypnotic, a massive living circuit completing itself across a world's surface. Joran adjusted the long-range array. "The other two coordinates, there's movement there too. Both systems showing identical energy profiles. It's synchronizing 3 points again." Yara said softly, "A full triad." Arian exhaled. "The bridge is reforming." Senna stared at the display. "If it's a transport system, something coming through." Mayek gripped the console. "And if it's a weapon, then this station dies either way," Arian said. The moment of equilibrium arrived like the stillness before a heartbeat. Every light on Bastion 9 dimmed, then returned in perfect unison. Outside, the planet shone with a smooth, even glow. The network's geometry extended beyond the atmosphere now, faint, enormous lines visible even against the stars. A sphere of light formed above the world, much larger than the first. Inside it, shapes flickered. Senna leaned forward. "That's not random. That's structure, machinery, architecture." Yara whispered, "It's opening a gateway." Arian said, "Not a weapon then, a connection." Joran muttered, "Between what and what?" Arian's gaze stayed fixed on the hologram. "Between the dead and the living, maybe." Suddenly, the comm systems came alive, static at first, then rhythm. The same pulse pattern that had once carried the alien lessons, now repeated through their speakers. Senna frowned. "It's using our transmission arrays again." Yara's eyes widened. "No, it's replaying us. The patterns match our earlier interference signal." Mayek said, "It's responding with our own voice." Arian turned toward the main console. "Patch it through." The sound stabilized into a single tone, followed by a sequence of modulated frequencies that formed recognizable shapes in the visualizer, a pattern of alternating bands, symmetrical and deliberate. Joran said softly, "It's talking back." Arian leaned close to the mic. "If you can understand us, show it." The response came instantly. The planet flared once, bright enough to eclipse the stars. When the light faded, 3 enormous glyphs glowed across its surface, identical to the ones first seen inside the ancient chamber. Senna recognized them first. Coordinates, those are positions in space. Where do they laid? Arian asked. She looked up. Not to the other beacons, to us. A silence thicker than gravity filled the control deck. Mech's voice was almost a whisper. It's mapping us into its system. Arian nodded slowly. It's adding humanity to the network. Joran said, but why? What does it want? Senna studied the readings. Maybe it doesn't want anything. Maybe it just expands, absorbs every thinking species it finds, linking them together. Yara shook her head. If that's true, then somewhere out there, someone else is watching us appear on their sky. Arian looked out the viewport. Then we just became the signal. That night, if one could call any period of dimmed lighting night, no one slept. The station's hum seemed deeper now, resonating at the edge of hearing. The planet below pulsed gently, steady as a living heart. Arian walked the observation ring alone. His reflection looked ghost-like against the glass. He imagined the others out there, those who might once have built this network, perhaps long dead, their machines still carrying out an endless cycle of connection. Humanity had always looked to the stars and wondered who might be watching. Now, he thought, they might be wondering the same about us. The next morning, the crew gathered again. Yara reported first. The energy flow has stabilized. No immediate threat to the station. Joran added, data link from the planet remains active. It's transmitting baseline environmental information, temperature, composition, gravity, almost as if cataloging. Senna looked from one display to another. It's documenting our system, integrating it. Mayek muttered, like a library. Arian nodded, or a census. He leaned against the console. Either way, we're inside the record now. There's no going back. But one question haunted them all. Who had built it, and where were they now? Senna was the first to voice it. What if the builders didn't vanish? What if they're still out there, waiting for the network to find new members? Yara said. Then we've just raised our hand. Mayek looked at Arian. So what do we do when they answer? Arian considered that for a long moment. Then, he said quietly, we make sure humanity answers back. The pulse continued through the next 12 rotations. It never stopped, never faltered, just kept breathing through the station's hull like a slow, endless tide. At first, the crew thought they were only hearing vibration through metal. Then Yara realized the rhythm had changed in subtle ways each day, like a code evolving. It's adjusting for our orbital drift, she said one morning. It's keeping us perfectly aligned. Mayek stared at the numbers. We're not orbiting the planet anymore, he said flatly. The planet is orbiting us. Arian studied the graphs. He felt the truth before the math confirmed it. The beacon was using Bastion 9 as a balancing node, shifting the entire world's motion around their position. Then the bridge isn't just open, he said quietly. We are part of its structure. On the 7th day, the light changed. The cobalt glow faded to silver, and the planet's surface projected faint, translucent arcs that stretched far beyond the atmosphere, tens of thousands of kilometers long. They shimmered like frozen waves. Senna stared at the image feed. They're forming a pattern, she said. Not random, geometric symmetry across 3 axes. Joran ran a model. It's a star map, but not of this region. The coordinates don't exist in our catalog. Yara frowned. Then where? He rotated the image until the pattern aligned with Galactic North. A single cluster at the map's center glowed brighter than the rest. Senna's breath caught. That's not a map of stars, she said. It's a map of gateways. Each point is another bridge. Mayek exhaled slowly. How many? Joran looked at the count. Thousands. Arian gathered them around the central table. If that's accurate, this network spans half the galaxy, and we are one new link in a chain older than recorded history. Yara asked, why show us this now? Because it wants us to understand what we've joined, he said. Senna added softly, or to remind us that it's bigger than us. The display changed again. A single pulse traveled along the map from one distant point toward their own. When it reached their node, a secondary pattern branched outward, one that matched the structure of human communication networks. Joran blinked. It's copying our data architecture. Mayek frowned. You mean it's learning how we communicate? Senna whispered. No, It's integrating how we communicate. Later, while the others slept, Yara remained in the lab. She opened a direct line to the planet and transmitted a simple binary query. Do you understand us? The reply came in seconds, one pulse, then another, then a long sustained tone that translated through the analyzer into a clear mathematical equivalence. Yes. She stared at the screen for a long time before asking the next question. What are you? This time the answer was longer. The translation rendered it into 3 words: we remember bridges. She recorded the data and shut the channel. When she found Arian in the observation ring, she didn't speak right away. He saw her face and knew. It answered, didn't it? He said. She nodded. It remembers bridges, that's all. He looked out toward the glowing world. Then maybe that's all it ever was, a memory machine trying to rebuild what was lost. Days passed. The crew began to notice small changes in the station's systems, efficiency improving beyond known tolerances, data pathways reorganizing themselves without human input. It wasn't sabotage, it was optimization. Joran whispered, half in awe, half in fear, it's making us better. Senna disagreed. No. It's making us compatible. The line between assistance and assimilation blurred with every hour. They could not tell whether the beacon was repairing what it had damaged or rewriting it in its own image. Arian finally gave the order: full manual control, isolate every subsystem. If we lose autonomy now, we stop being human. The lockdown worked for 3 rotations, then the beacon adapted again. The resonance increased until the entire station trembled, lights flickered, systems reconnected themselves even with manual overrides in place. It's overriding us, Yara said. Arian's jaw tightened. Can we disconnect from the planet's field entirely? Only by leaving orbit, and the engines can't outrun the gravitational lock. Mayek slammed a fist against the console. So what now? We just become part of the architecture? Senna's voice was calm but resolute. Maybe we learn what it's trying to build first. An hour later, the beacon transmitted again, this time sending not coordinates but images. Not photographs, abstract representations of forms, structures floating in impossible geometries, corridors stretching into blackness, cities made of light. Arian recognized one instantly. That's the inside of the chamber we found on the surface. Another image followed, a tall spire rising from a world that wasn't theirs, with figures moving around it. The shapes were indistinct but undeniably humanoid. Senna stared at the screen. That's not a recording, that's real time. Someone else is still out there. The revelation hit them all differently. Joran murmured, then the builders survived. Yara whispered, or their descendants. Mayek looked at Arian, and they just saw us looking back. Arian took a slow breath. Then we send a message, not as scientists, as humans. He typed the words himself, letting the beacon translate them into its luminous script. We are the new link. We seek to learn, not to harm. The planet responded with a flare that bathed the station in silver light. For a heartbeat, every wall and surface seemed translucent, as though the entire station were being scanned molecule by molecule. Then the light withdrew. The transmission ceased. When the glare faded, their systems showed a single addition, a new coordinate, faint and distant, far beyond known space. Joran checked the distance. Even at light speed, that's centuries away. Senna said, unless the bridge can carry us. Arian looked out at the quiet world below. It's giving us a choice. Stay here and remain part of the network, or step through and see what waits on the other side. No one spoke. The hum of the beacon filled the silence. The decision was not made quickly. No one on Bastion 9 slept that night. Even with the lights dimmed, the planet below glowed against the glass like a living eye, waiting for an answer. Yara spent hours recalculating orbital mechanics, searching for some trace of familiar gravity to hold on to. There was none. The network had woven their station into its geometry, and now its pull came from everywhere and nowhere at once. Mayek sat alone in the galley, staring into a mug gone cold. We light a signal, he muttered to no one, and end up standing in front of the door it opens. Senna joined him quietly. You sound surprised. He gave a hollow laugh. I sound tired. You always knew this was bigger than us, she said. Now we just know how much bigger. By morning, Arian had made his decision. He called the crew to the observation deck, the planet a blue-white mirror beneath their feet. "We've learned everything we can from here," he said. "The beacon offered a path, and we've spent months reacting to it instead of acting. I won't die orbiting a mystery." Yara's expression was guarded. "You think it's safe?" "No," he said simply, "but I think it's necessary. Humanity has always stepped forward when fear told us to stop. That's why we're here." Mayak frowned. "We don't even know if there's air on the other side." Senna replied, "If there isn't, we'll find out for everyone else." Silence followed, then Yara nodded. "Then let's make it count." Preparations took a full rotation. They packed survival gear, sealed suits, and a portable data core with every record of what had happened. If they never came back, at least something might survive. Joran monitored the beacon's field strength. "It's stable," he said. "Power flow constant, corridor coordinates locked." Arian studied the readings. "Can we move through without losing orbit?" "It'll pull the station along whether we want to or not," Joran said. "Once it activates, we are passengers." Mayak muttered, "Then let's hope it knows how to drive." The activation sequence began at 0600 hours. Outside, the planet's surface split with radiant lines, each glowing brighter than before. The air around the station shimmered. Gravity shifted sideways, everyone felt it in their bones. Senna steadied herself on the console. Energy rising past predicted threshold. Whatever's happening, it's starting. The light intensified until nothing existed but brilliance. For a moment, they were nowhere, no sound, no orientation, only an impossible stillness that felt endless. Then the light folded in on itself, and they were moving. It wasn't travel in any conventional sense. There was no acceleration, no inertia. One moment they were above the silent planet, the next, surrounded by a sea of silver threads stretching into darkness. Yara whispered, "We are inside the bridge." The corridor extended beyond sight, vast, radiant, filled with the quiet hum of energy moving through invisible channels. Each filament pulsed like the rhythm of a heart. Arian spoke softly, "Record everything." Sensors flared to life. The readings made no physical sense. Space curved back on itself, distances folding into dimensions that didn't belong in any known equation. Mac stared out the viewport. "If this is how the universe really looks, we've been blind since birth." Hours passed, if hours could still be measured in this place. The station drifted along a current that seemed to guide itself. They passed what looked like windows, translucent plains showing glimpses of other worlds, mountains under alien suns, oceans of light, skies filled with drifting towers. Senna pressed her hand to the glass. "They're real, each one's another node." Yara's voice trembled. "It's a map made of reality." Arian turned from the viewport. "This is what the builders saw every day." Mayak muttered, "No wonder they stopped looking up. They brought the sky to themselves." Then, at last, the current began to slow. Ahead, the corridor narrowed into a point of golden light. Beyond it, shapes moved, vast structures suspended in a space that seemed to shimmer between being and dream. "Approaching destination," Joran said. His voice was thin with awe. The station emerged into open void again. Before them stretched a world unlike any they had seen, a sphere woven of light and matter, its surface covered in the same lattice as the ancient planet, but intact, unbroken. Towers rose from the continents, each one radiating power. Senna whispered, "It's alive." Arian nodded, "We've found the origin." Communication arrays flared to life automatically. The network recognized them. Symbols filled every screen, familiar but arranged in new sequences. Yara began translating. "It's greeting us," she said, "a direct acknowledgement." Mayak leaned over. "What's it saying?" She hesitated. "It says you are late." A shiver ran through the deck. Joran murmured, "Then it's been expecting someone." Arian exhaled slowly. "Maybe not us, but someone." The next transmission contained data instead of words, images of the same world from ages past. Cities alive with beings shaped like light, ships passing through the bridges as easily as thoughts. Then came the collapse, a storm of radiation, the network fracturing, worlds falling dark one by one. Senna's voice broke the silence. They destroyed themselves. Arian shook his head. No, they preserved what they could in the beacons. They built the network to remember. Yara pointed to the final image. And to rebuild, it's showing reconstruction. Mayek's voice was low. Using whoever stumbles into the signal, Arian said, or offering them what was lost. The surface of the luminous world began to shift. A single point of light rose from it, moving toward their orbit, smooth, deliberate, aware. Something's coming, Joran said. Senna's heartbeat quickened. It's not a weapon's signature, it's biological or something close. Yara adjusted the scanners. Energy form. No solid mass. The light approached the viewport, hovering just beyond the glass. It was the size of a person, shimmering with slow motion like liquid thought. No one moved. Arian took a single step forward. If you can understand us, he said softly, we are here to listen. The light pulsed once, and a voice, not sound but meaning, filled the air. We have waited for new voices. The bridges endure because they must. You will remember us. The station trembled, not from impact but resonance, as though every molecule carried the echo of that voice. Then the light withdrew, descending toward the planet below. Arian stared after it. It's calling us down. They descended in the auxiliary shuttle. The air around the origin world shimmered like heat haze, though no star blazed nearby. The planet's glow came from within, a faint golden luminescence that moved through the clouds like breath. Arian sat in the pilot's seat, hands steady on the controls. Atmosphere compositions breathable, he said. Pressure within range, temperature stable, gravity 0.9 standard. Mayek exhaled. So far, so good. Senna, watching the readouts, said quietly, it's as if the planet's waiting for us. Yara replied, maybe it always was. As the shuttle entered the lower atmosphere, the view resolved into detail. Vast plains of crystalline growths stretched for kilometers, glittering like frozen rivers. Between them stood towering spires of translucent metal, each surrounded by concentric rings that pulsed with the same rhythm as the beacon's heartbeat. Joran murmured, the architecture matches the chamber on the first planet, but intact. This is what it looked like before it broke. Arian said, then we are looking at the source. The shuttle settled onto a wide platform overlooking a canyon that seemed to descend forever. The surface shimmered faintly underfoot, smooth as glass but responsive to their touch, brightening wherever they stepped. Mek knelt and ran a gloved hand across it. It's reading us, he said, sensing bioelectric fields. Senna added, it's welcoming us. A path of light unfolded ahead of them. It wasn't random. The walkway extended as they moved, guiding them toward a structure in the distance, a tall tower, its peak lost in a haze of radiance. No wind stirred, no sound but their own footsteps. Yara whispered, it's too quiet. Arian glanced back. After all this time, maybe silence is the only thing that's left. They reached the base of the tower. The walls were covered in moving symbols, shifting and merging like living script. When Yara touched one, it froze, then reshaped itself into human-readable patterns. It's converting for us, she said softly. It wants us to understand. Inside, the tower was hollow, one enormous chamber filled with slow-moving strands of light that rose from the floor to the ceiling, weaving together like threads in a loom. At the chamber's center floated a sphere of golden radiance. The moment they entered, it pulsed. The strands around it vibrated in response, producing a low, resonant hum that filled the air. Yara's instruments flickered. Massive data transmission detected, she said. It's broadcasting directly into the ship's storage core. Mayek frowned. What kind of data? She glanced at the readout. Everything, histories, maps, language, culture, it's giving us all of it. Senna whispered, they're passing it on. Arian stepped closer to the sphere. Then they didn't die, they became this. The light shifted again, and shapes began to form within it, figures outlined in golden glow. They were humanoid, but not solid, their movements slow and deliberate. One of them stepped forward, and a voice filled the chamber, layered and deep. You come from the dust between stars, carrying what remains of curiosity. The bridges were made for those who remember why they ask. Arian swallowed hard. You built this network, we began it, the voice said, but not for ourselves. The bridges were designed to preserve thought beyond time, to link those who would endure. We failed to control what we created. The network lived on without us. Senna said quietly, and now it's found us. You are the next sequence, the voice replied. You have learned to listen, not just to take. That was the test. The light around them shifted, showing flashes of the past. The ancient civilizations' rise, their discoveries, their hubris, and their final act of creation, embedding their essence into the bridges themselves so memory would never die. Yara's eyes widened. You encoded yourselves into the network. We are the pattern, not the makers, the voice said. The makers are gone. We are what they left behind, the will to continue. The bridges rebuild through those who reach them. Mayek muttered, so this was never about us finding them. It was about them finding someone new. Each world must choose, the voice continued, to remain alone or to join the continuity of thought. You have already stepped through. You cannot return unchanged. Arian looked to his crew. Yara stood silent, eyes reflecting the golden glow. Senna's hands were trembling slightly, though her face showed calm. Mek's jaw was tight. Joran's gaze flicked between the readings and the figures, torn between awe and analysis. Arian said, if we join this network, what happens to us? You expand, the voice said. Your kind will see beyond the small cage of your stars. You will not lose yourselves unless you choose to. The bridges preserve identity as well as memory. Yara whispered, and if we refuse, the light dimmed slightly, then you will forget. The bridge will close and no one will come after you. The pattern must continue through those who accept it. The chamber fell silent. Only the faint hum of energy remained. Arian spoke at last. We came here seeking knowledge, not transcendence, but if this is what they meant to give, we can't just turn away. Humanity needs to know. Senna said, then we carry it home. We don't merge, we remember. Yara looked at the light. Maybe that's what it wants. To be remembered, not repeated. Mayek exhaled. Then let's take what we can before it changes its mind. The golden figures stepped back. The sphere pulsed once more, and a beam of light touched the data core strapped to Yara's pack. The device glowed, its surface filling with fractal inscriptions that moved like living code. It is done, the voice said. The bridges will await your return. Carry the memory forward. The light began to fade. The strands that filled the chamber slowly dissolved into dust, and the tower grew dim. Arian said softly, they're letting us go. Senna whispered, or they're finally resting. Outside, the sky darkened as if the world itself were closing its eyes. The path of light leading back to the shuttle dimmed behind them, fading one step at a time. When they reached the ship, the surface of the planet was already returning to stillness. As the shuttle lifted off, Yara looked down and said, they didn't die for nothing. Arian nodded. No, they built the bridge so someone would follow. Now we carry the rest. They ascended through the soft golden haze, back toward orbit. The station awaited, drifting at the edge of the planet's radiance. Joran broke the long silence. So what do we tell them when we get home? Arian answered without hesitation. The truth, that the universe is wider than we imagined, and that it remembers us when we choose to remember it. Senna smiled faintly, and that humanity still knows how to listen. The return corridor opened almost gently, a widening of light that swallowed the shuttle whole. For a breath, there was no movement, only that weightless sense of crossing between heartbeats. Then gravity returned, and the familiar stars of the local cluster unfolded before them. Bastion 9 floated intact above the pale world that had first called them here, its silver beacon now dormant. They did not speak for a long time. The hum of the engines and the thin rasp of recycled air were the only proof that they were alive. Mek finally said, if we just send this home, the world will go mad. Half will think we've found gods, half will think we've betrayed them. Arian answered, then we send it anyway. They deserve the truth, even if it frightens them. Senna leaned back against her seat. Truth never stays buried. It just waits for the next bridge. The docking clamps hissed as they rejoined the station. It felt smaller than before, its corridors cramped and utilitarian after the quiet grandeur of the origin world. But there was comfort in the sound of metal beneath their boots. Yara transferred the golden data core to the central terminal. Its surface still rippled faintly with light. When she set it into the cradle, the station's lights dimmed, then stabilized. A new set of symbols appeared on the main screen, an interface written in both the alien script and their own. Joran said, "It's linking to our systems automatically." Arian replied, "Let it, but record everything. We'll need a full log for transmission." The interface expanded. Images poured across the displays, stars, civilizations, languages, the pattern of the network spreading like a living organism across the galaxy. Each pulse represented a world that had once joined or might join again. Mech whispered, "We are part of a map that never ends." They spent 3 days sorting the data. The core contained entire libraries of thought, histories of vanished species, mathematical systems that defied known logic, recordings of art and philosophy that no human tongue could yet speak. The information itself was vast enough to occupy generations. Senna said, "We can't send all of this. The bandwidth would take months." Yara nodded. "Then we send the translation algorithms and the first level of cultural archives. Enough for proof, not overload." Arian approved. "We'll make it their choice. Humanity can decide how far it wants to walk." On the 4th day, they re-established contact with command. The transmission took several minutes to synchronize across the relay chain, but at last, a familiar voice filled the control deck, raw with disbelief, relief, and the quiet edge of awe. "Bastion 9, this is Relay 12. You were listed lost 6 standard months ago. Identify and report." Arian looked at his crew, then leaned toward the mic. "Relay 12, this is Bastion 9. We're alive and we're bringing something home." There was a pause. "You've been beyond the perimeter. What did you find?" Arian said. "A bridge, and the memory of those who built it." It took another week to complete the transfer. During that time, they spoke little of what they had seen. Some things refused to fit into ordinary words. Yara found herself staring often at the stars outside the viewport. The patterns looked different now, as if each point of light hid a door. "They'll come," she said one night. "Others will follow our path." Mayak replied, "And maybe we'll be the ones they hear calling." Senna smiled faintly. "That's what the bridges are for." When the final transmission packet was ready, Arian stood before the console. His hands hovered above the control field. "Once we send this," he said, "there's no going back. The network will be known. The question is what we do afterward." Yara said, "We go home. We help them understand it before someone else tries to own it." Mayak added, "And if command tries to bury it?" Arian's expression was calm. "Then we remind them that discovery isn't a weapon." He pressed the command. The packet launched, a beam of compressed data racing toward the inner systems. It would reach Earth in a little over 2 weeks. After that, nothing would be the same. For 2 rotations, they drifted in orbit, waiting. The beacon below remained silent, its glow reduced to a faint ember beneath the clouds. The crew repaired the station, restored the greenhouses, and tried to pretend that life had returned to ordinary rhythm. But the rhythm of the bridge still pulsed in the back of their minds. On the 3rd night, Senna woke to a quiet vibration. She rose and walked to the observation ring. Outside, a single filament of light rose from the planet, climbing toward the stars. It didn't reach them, it simply extended upward until it vanished into the black. Arian joined her. "Another bridge opening?" She shook her head. "No, it's a signal, a farewell." When the message from command finally arrived, it was short. Confirmation of receipt, request for debriefing, coordinates for return. No judgment yet, no praise or condemnation, just the thin composure of an organization faced with the impossible. Arian looked at the text for a long moment, then turned to the crew. Time to go home. The engines came alive. Bastion 9 began its slow arc away from the silent planet, leaving behind the glimmering skeleton of the beacon. As they accelerated, the light below dimmed entirely, fading back into darkness. Mech whispered, "It's gone." Arian answered, "No, it's sleeping, waiting for whoever comes next." 2 weeks later, they crossed the perimeter of human-charted space. Messages from command became more frequent, each one cautious but tinged with wonder. The translation algorithms had already begun to reveal fragments of the alien archives, artwork projected across public channels, recordings of concepts no language could quite hold. The world was changing faster than any of them could have planned. Senna read the reports aloud. "They're building research arrays, they're preparing expeditions." Yara smiled. "So it begins again." Arian nodded. That's what the bridges wanted. On their final approach to Earth orbit, the blue planet filled the viewports, brighter and more alive than Arian remembered. He stood at the observation window, watching it grow larger until it filled the world beneath them. Mech joined him quietly. "Do you think they'll understand what we brought back?" Arian said. "Not yet, but they will." He looked down at the planet, the oceans gleaming like the surface of that first alien world, the clouds curling in patient spirals. Somewhere beneath them, humanity was waiting, restless and curious as always. Arian smiled. "They'll listen. That's how bridges are built." That night, as the station settled into orbit, Yara returned to the data core. It still pulsed faintly, as though alive. When she touched it, a final message appeared on the display, simple, written now entirely in their own language. "The pattern endures through those who remember." She closed her eyes and whispered, "We remember." Outside the viewport, the stars seemed to flicker in reply.